I feel for Jonah. I really do. We don't talk about Jonah a lot in church. He doesn't come up very often. His book is short. It doesn't make great reading for a church service. So we often just kind of skip over it and move on, so you might not remember it so well. And if you do remember it, you probably remember the part about the big fish, because it is a big fish story. So let me catch you up on Jonah. The character, Jonah, son of Amittai, is mentioned briefly in the book of 2 Kings, just kind of in the background. There was this prophet, Jonah. And sometime after that was written, somebody saw that character and said, I'm going to use this Jonah, this person who may have been a real person but is sitting in the background, to tell my own story, to write my own book about the irresistibility of God's call, about the universality of God's mercy, about how when God asks you to do something like deliver a message about God's mercy to somebody else, you ought to just do it and not try to run away. And so we end up with this book of Jonah. It starts with God coming to Jonah and saying, Jonah, I would like you to go to the city of Nineveh and tell the people of the city of Nineveh to repent and change their ways, to straighten up and fly right, or I, the Lord your God, will destroy them. And Jonah replies, but I don't wanna. I mean, Nineveh is terrible, and the people of Nineveh are the worst. And I've been looking at their empire. I've been looking at those Assyrians, and I have noticed that they have been looking over here, and I think just maybe they're thinking about coming and going to war with us and taking a bunch of us into exile. And I don't like that at all, so I don't want to go. Because if I go and I tell them to repent and change their ways, to straighten up and fly right, they just might do that. And if they do that, then you will be merciful, and I would like them to be destroyed. So thank you very much, but I am going to get on a boat going to Tarshish, which is in the other direction. And that is what he does. He gets on a boat headed to Tarshish, which is in the other direction, and God raises a storm to come at the boat. Now Jonah is asleep in the boat. And this storm rises, and the sailors are wondering, what is happening? Why is this storm rising up? Why is this coming at our ship? Why are we tilting and drifting and listing and taking on water? Why have the sails been torn to shreds? Why does that mast look so precarious? Which one of you ticked off which god? And they go and get Jonah. And they draw lots to find out which of the people on this boat angered which god who is sending a storm after them, which is surely going to kill them all. And the lot falls on Jonah, and Jonah fesses up. I'm supposed to be going to Nineveh right now. And decided not to, because the people of Nineveh are the worst. So I got on this boat going to Tarshish, and now the Lord my God has raised up a storm to force us to turn. So here's what we'll do. You bind me up and throw me overboard into the water. And you, fine sailors, you'll be safe, and I will drown and die, which will still be better than going to Nineveh. And so they do that. And the storm clears up, and the sailors give thanks. And Jonah gets swallowed by a fish. While Jonah is in the fish, Jonah prays, because Jonah does not want to be in a fish. And eventually the fish spits him out on dry land closer to Nineveh, so Jonah goes to Nineveh. Jonah is defeated. Jonah is convicted. Jonah is stuck doing this, so Jonah goes to Nineveh and tells the people of Nineveh, repent and change your ways, straighten up and fly right. And the people of Nineveh do. They put on sackcloth. They rub ashes on their face. They repent and ask for mercy. And not just the people, but the animals, the sheep and the pigs and the cattle, the cats and the dogs. They're there putting sackcloth and ashes on mice, so that all of the city and everything in it can repent and change their ways, can straighten up and fly right, and God has mercy on them, and Jonah is unhappy about this. This displeases Jonah. So Jonah goes outside the city and sits down in the hot sun and sulks, because God has had mercy on people who Jonah did not want God to have mercy on. And then this bush grows. And the sun is no longer beating down so fiercely. And a breeze comes in, and Jonah's feeling a little cooler, a little more relaxed, still angry, but happier, more okay. And then the bush dies, and the sun beats down, and a warm wind comes through, and Jonah is miserable again and tells God that very thing. And God says, "You cared so much about a bush?" And Jonah says, "Yes. And now I'm miserable again because the bush is gone. I had to do this thing I didn't want to do. I was swallowed by a fish. It's been a heck of a week. And the people of Nineveh, who are the worst, have been shown mercy by you, and I didn't want that in the first place, and I am miserable, so can I just die now?" And God says, "You cared so much about a bush. Imagine how much I care about this city." I don't know if Jonah's satisfied with that. Jonah's a pretty hard person, and a hard person to like. Jonah's an upset person and a hard person to cheer up. But I feel for Jonah, because Jonah has had a heck of a week. And that week has just been full of all of this stuff that Jonah has not wanted to do, but has had to do anyway, has been forced to do at God point. We're starting this sermon series on burnout. We're doing this a little bit because, well, I'll be honest and vulnerable. I sometimes feel a little burnt out. There's a lot going on and a lot to keep track of and a lot to do, and sometimes it is a bit too much. But also because I've heard from some of you, a lot of us are feeling at least a little burnt out, at least some of the time. And I picked this story of Jonah because I have a theory about how burnout comes to be. Now, it comes to be for a lot of little reasons. It comes to be because we are overwhelmed. There are just too many things to do. It comes to be because the things that we're doing don't seem to matter and we don't feel like we're making a difference. We're just going through the motions. But it comes to be most of all, I think, because we lose so many want-tos to all of the have-tos. You know it, and I know it. There are things that we want to do. Each of us has things that we want to do. Things that bring us joy, things that bring us life. And all of us have things that we have to do. That just gotta get done. Sometimes even the things that we want to do can become things that we have to do. We can start off doing things joyfully, and as they become habits, as they become expectations, they just shrivel up into these have-tos, into these, I have to do this, I've got to do this, really? And we find ourselves not wanting to. And life just becoming a series of things that we have to do. Like I said, it's a theory. But I think the source of so much burnout, the source of so much frustration, the source of so much hardship, the source of so much emotional weariness is getting caught up in that list of things that we have to do and not having time or energy or space for the things that we want to do. Here's the thing about have-tos. There are some have-tos that we actually have to. Jonah is in this position. He doesn't have a choice. He really does have to go to Nineveh. He really does have to tell the people of Nineveh to repent and change their ways, to straighten up and fly right. He really does have to accept the fact that God is going to show mercy on the people of Nineveh, who, again, I will remind you, are the worst. But so often those things that we have to are just expectations that we have of ourselves or that others have of us. They're not really have-tos. They're just habits. They're just used-tos. They're just, we've always done it this ways. And so we feel like we have to keep going. We have to trudge on. Long after those things have given us any life, long after those things have given us any enthusiasm, long after those things have given us any hope. And so we find ourselves doing things that we don't want to do because we feel like we have to, even though we don't. And we find ourselves doing things that used to give us life, but no longer do, and that feel pointless and hopeless and like they're not doing anything because we feel like we have to do them. And what we need is a little bit of permission. What we need is that permission to say, to admit, to be honest with ourselves, to say, I don't actually have to. I can let this thing, whatever it is, go. I'll give an example, and it's an easy example, and it's a simple example, and it's almost a dumb example, but it's an example nonetheless. Last year, in an attempt to encourage prayer, I posted to Facebook every day a prayer. A few people saw those, and a few people read those, and maybe a few people prayed those. But it meant, every so often, I was spending a day writing a bunch of prayers. And that is hard, creative work. It's one thing to pray in the moment. It's another thing to try to type out a prayer that'll fit on an image and still make sense and be appropriate for the day and match whatever holidays we have or remembrances we have or seasons we have. It's a hard thing to put all of that creativity in, and it's a hard thing to watch it go out, and it's a hard thing to get very little response. And so as we approached the end of the year, I thought through this, because I had told myself, I've started this, so I have to do it. It's got to keep going, even though I'm sitting down at my computer to write out prayers and not feeling prayerful. Even though I'm sitting down at my computer to write prayers and I'm not feeling grateful. Even though I'm sitting down at my computer to write prayers and I'm not feeling that connection that I need to feel to write a good prayer. And so at the end of the year, I said, I've done a year. It's been out there. I don't have to do it. I can let it go. And it's not like it frees up that much time, but it does free up a bunch of space. It frees up a bunch of bandwidth. It frees up a bunch of spirit. Because I'm no longer burdened by this thing that I felt like I had to do, that I don't have to do. And again, I know that's a small example and maybe a silly example, but it's an example nonetheless because there is this importance in how we relate to God, in how we relate to one another. When we get caught up in the have-tos, in the things that we think we have to, in the duties of the past, we can find ourselves going through the motions unconnected to the Spirit that brings us to life. Singing the songs because we've always sung the songs, but not bringing any emotion into it, not having dynamics. Praying the prayers because we've always prayed the prayers, but not really talking to God. Standing up and sitting down because we've always stood up and sat down, but not moving with joy. We can find ourselves going through the motions because we have to go through the motions. But that's not what this is supposed to be. That's not who we are supposed to be. We were not made to go through the motions. We were made to live. We were made to abide in love. We were made to abide in God. We were made to be brought to life. We were made to have joy. And so sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, it is important to look at those things that we feel like we have to do and ask if we really have to do them. And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, it is important to take those things that we thought we had to do that we don't really have to do and hand them off or put them down or give them up. Because by doing that, we open up the possibility of doing more want-tos, of listening more closely to God's actual call to us, of stepping into God's reign of love, of stepping into new life. I wonder how much would have been different for Jonah if he had taken that attitude. If instead of saying, Nineveh, he had managed to say, I get to go. I get to explore. I get to meet these Ninevehs. Maybe they're not, in fact, the worst. And at the very least, I get to proclaim to others the mercy that God has proclaimed to me. I get to share with others the grace that God has given me. I get to see what God can bring even to Nineveh. And I get for just a moment a tree, a bush, a shrub, a little taste of God's grace. And then, when that's done, I get to move on to my want-tos, the stuff that gives me life. For Jonah, that's apparently being a very crabby person. But for the rest of us, that might just be trying some new stuff, exploring some new ideas, grabbing onto old things that we had forgotten and let go, finding new things that can bring us to life. We might discover that we can stop being burnt out on the have-tos of life and be on fire for the want-tos that God is calling us to. And what a wonderful life living in those want-tos, living in that call of God would be.